afternoon, and welcome to the latest in our webinar series, Enrollment Trends for Leadership in Graduate Education, sponsored by Liaison. We have a really great program for you all today. As people are trickling in, I just want to go over a few webinar logistics before we dive into the meat of this conversation. So this is probably familiar to you if you've attended one of our webinars before, but we'll be using the Q&A feature. So if you've got questions, please submit them through the Q&A feature. You can submit them at any time and we will answer them during the Q&A period. We are recording this. This is a recorded webinar. So we'll be mailing that out to registrants as well as posting on the CGS website after the event. And then the chat is available. It is for you to discuss with your fellow attendees. Conversations very much encouraged. Just keep it civil. And with that, I will turn it over to Adrian Vincent, who is our Assistant Vice President for Membership and Alliances.
Great. Thanks, Sarah, and a warm welcome to all who are joining us here today. CGS members consistently identify graduate enrollment management as one of their most pressing issues, which is why I'm really pleased that today's webinar will focus on the topic and will provide an opportunity for graduate education leaders from 3 CGS member institutions to share their perspectives. In what promises to be a great conversation, the panel will address a range of topics, including strategies for internal university collaboration on graduate enrollment, the use of technology in supporting enrollment management, and how graduate deans can contribute to the success of their graduate students and programs and support the missions and goals of their institutions. I'd like to thank Liaison International for their programmatic and financial support for the webinar and for participating in the CGS Sustaining Membership Network, which allows companies to demonstrate their commitment to advancing graduate education. Steve Taylor is Vice President for Graduate Enrollment Strategy at Liaison, and he will serve as our moderator today and introduce our fantastic panel. Steve joined Liaison in 2020 after 18 years in higher education administration, serving in leadership roles at institutions like Harvard Business School and Arizona State University. Steve's experience has focused on enrollment management, process and systems efficiency, and organizational culture development. His most recent university position was Associate Dean for Arizona State University's W.P. Carey School of Business, where he led the unit responsible for all graduate business programs, and he holds a Master of Business Administration. So without further ado, Steve.
Wow, that's quite an intro. That makes me feel like I've really got to bring my A game today. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited for this conversation. As someone who is an irregular coffee drinker, I'm on my 2nd cup today, so I'm even more energized than I normally might be. Sarah, let's go ahead and jump to the next slide. What exactly are we going to talk about today and why? Leaders in higher ed are faced with perhaps the most complicated landscape that U.S. higher ed has seen in 50 years, right? A lot of it is functional responsibility that you have right now, right? We rarely have time to step back and think about our leadership practice and the kinds of things that help you navigate through all the challenges and disruptions that you're being faced with. Leadership at all levels are expected to have a mastery of things, process, policy, and people related to your unit, but also things like technology, budgeting, finance, diversity and inclusion, curriculum, right? There's dozens of things that you're required to do here, all while keeping students centered among all the noise of working in a high pressure, high visibility role. As a field, we're pretty fortunate to have groups like CGS that are willing to facilitate conversations like this one. So we're going to kick off the internally focused discussion, right? This is the leadership administrative view on the kind of challenges of leadership in this enrollment space. As far as our conversation goes, we'll do our introduction next here, then jump into the conversation where we have a handful of planned questions. And I'll be looking to break us from discussion with about 15 to 20 minutes left at the end for audience questions before I kind of wrap up with some final notes and pass it back to our friends at CGS. So let's go ahead and get to our panelists, shall we? Sarah, if you want to get to our lovely intro slide, we'll go in this order. So Erica, would you mind going first for us and letting the folks on the session today know a bit about your background and the context that you're coming from?
Sure. Thank you, Stephen. My name is Dr. Erica Covington. I'm Dean of the Graduate School at Coppin State University. I hail from the College of Business at Coppin State University. My area is management and marketing. Prior to getting into higher education, I also worked with several Fortune 500 companies in the area of marketing and sales and development and training as well. So I've kind of been in the business field for quite some time. I won't tell you how many years because that's too telling, but I've been in that field for a while. I've been in my role as dean for going over 2 years now, so I'm still fairly new to the role, but I'm excited to be here today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Erica. Appreciate it. Kent, would you do the same for us?
Sure, great, Steve. My name is Kent Games. I am the Director of Graduate Studies at Indiana State University. I am from the College of Health and Human Services, and my background is in kinesiology and athletic training. We've been, I came into the role of Dean of the College of Graduate Professional Studies in 2021. And then we went through a reorganization in which we actually dissolved the college and transitioned into an office model so we could be a little more agile. And then I transitioned from Dean of the College of Graduate Professional Studies to the Director of Office of Graduate Studies, where I've been there since, I guess, 2022 was the official transition date, and primarily responsible for kind of curricular planning and alignment, as well as graduate enrollment management.
All right, awesome. Yeah, every year since 2020 has been kind of a dog year in terms of the amount packed into it. So thank you, Kent. All right, Julie, I know you need no introduction, but would you wrap up the intros for us and tell folks a little bit about yourself?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Julie Masterson. I'm from Missouri State University. My title is Associate Provost and Dean of the Graduate School, a longtime member of CGS, and appreciate so much the support from CGS as well as Liaison. I'm anxious to have our conversation today.
All right, excellent. Thanks. Well, Sarah, I think we can cut the slides now because to take Julie's cue here, let's go ahead and jump into it. So Julie, I'm going to pitch the first question to you. I want to focus our conversation in general on some of the big pieces of kind of what it's like to work as a leader in enrollment, but I want to set the stage first, right? So how did you come into the role? Can you describe your journey into a leadership role, right? A lot of faculty kind of get past that first couple of years and think, hey, I could do what the dean does. That seems like a fun job. How did you get into it? Who helped you along the way? Tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, I was not one of those faculty members who looked at a dean and thought, I could do that. Why would I want to do that? Why would I want to ever give up the perfect job in the world of being a faculty member where I got to study what I wanted, talk about it whenever I wanted, and people had to listen because I was going to test them. So for me, I started out as a part-time fellow in the provost's office because I identified a need and I wanted to be able to do something about it. In my case, that happened to be what I consider to be a lack of clarity and transparency in our tenure and promotion process. So I was really excited to get a chance to work on that in the provost's office while retaining my faculty status. And I don't know, about 2 years into the role, I thought, I like this. And the reason that I liked it is because I found myself drawn to a position where I had the authority, the power to say yes. And I have always loved that. I could do things, design and implement systems that are more effective, supportive, efficient. And it really has surpassed even my wildest hopes of being able to do that. So many people helped me along the way, starting with the university provost and the president at the time, but the other deans, faculty. I remember the associate dean said, she's never even been on grad council. How can she do this job? And the answer was, because all of you are going to help me, and help me, they did. Externally, CGS was a major source of support. And from the get-go, I was signed on to be a member, would religiously follow the dean's listserv, et cetera, and always found out that when I needed something, I could reach out to the staff at CGS or my fellow deans and get answers. And then Liaison, I've been with Liaison in one capacity or another for going on to 2 decades. And I've told the story so many times, but I was working on a partnership in Brazil in the middle of the night when I got an email that my director of grad enrollment management was resigning and would be gone by the time I got back in the country. So after crying, my first call was to my colleague at Liaison, Karen Jacobs, and my question was, what are we going to do about this? And indeed, she helped me. So I've been so blessed to be supported both internally and externally.
Excellent. Okay. Kent, I'm going to pitch to you next, and it's a tough act to follow. Julie comes to this pure of heart and with the intent to help, with lots of hands along the way helping. I presume you have a similar story. How did you end up in a leadership role?
So similar to Julie, I started out in graduate education as a faculty fellow in the College of Graduate Professional Studies, where I was working on a project about reimagining graduate education and really moving our practices and our systems and our whole positioning into the 21st century. And I did that for a year and was intending to move into my second year as being a faculty fellow. And there was an unexpected resignation from our dean of the College of Graduate Professional Studies. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. I didn't necessarily take the traditional route to administration, right? I moved through the faculty ranks and was a full professor with tenure, but hadn't served as a chair, hadn't served as a associate dean or anything in that capacity. And it kind of appeared in front of me. The opportunity appeared in front of me a little unexpectedly. And I felt like I was ready, right? I felt like after spending a year deeply researching where we were as an institution and where we could be, I felt ready to say yes, even though I may not have had the same experiences as others would on a resume or a CV. I think the biggest surprise that I had was about 3 weeks after saying yes, I was tapped by the provost and the president to reconsider the organizational structure of graduate education in Indiana State. We were going, I'm sure as many of our colleagues at regional public institutions experienced after the pandemic, we were dealing with some financial challenges. And one of the areas where they saw a lot of redundancy was in graduate education, because the colleges of graduate professional study often serve as a mini student success office, a mini registrar's office, a mini office of admissions, right? And so and we also had all of those offices around campus. So we really did have an opportunity to modernize our practices and really position ourselves and position now the Office of Graduate Studies to be more agile and to be more future focused, while allowing the academic colleges to be focused on things like student success, and the registrar's office to be focused on registrar office activities, and the Office of Admissions to be focused on helping get those students here and make sure that they are in a place to be successful when our faculty receive them their first day on campus.
Wow. All right, Erica, Kent might win the first year complexity award. Welcome to the job. Please reorganize the college. That's a tough one. But both Julie and Kent have a process thread that kind of ties through their journey here. What's your story?
So I would like to say that I'm probably in the middle of both of those. I understand both views. I think, like Julie, I came into this role, well, I was faculty senate president. So I was able to see it, I guess, probably from a faculty perspective. I had a broad view of like the campus and how things operate. And I guess with a business background, I naturally think of structure and how things operate. So I had a broad view coming into the seat. I didn't expect to come into leadership because I was not a chair. I'm a tenured associate professor. So, similar to what Julie said, it was ideal to teach your classes and research and enjoy that time. But at the same time, I knew I wanted more, and I wanted to offer more to my institution. We're a small HBCU. We've made significant growth changes in the last 5 years, and especially post-COVID. We were seeing growth when other colleges and universities were decreasing in size. So there was so much potential in this role. So when it was offered to me, I was excited because I thought, this is my chance to kind of implement some ideas and to make the office work a little bit more effectively and efficiently. It is a host of challenges, similar to what Kenneth said, finding the right niche between the registrar and getting the enrollment together, but yet still interacting with faculty when you see a need to, change the programs or maybe introduce something new to your list of offerings. But it's like everybody working in concert together and, trying to get everybody on the same page. And, that's no easy task.
Right.
But I think everybody can understand that you're looking for the best and you want to see improvement overall. So even though it might not be something that they, want to necessarily hear or, be open to initially, they see the bigger picture to know that it's all going towards improving the way things operate.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You bring the kind of strategy and communications piece to the process side, which gives us some interesting pillars to kind of consider. But Erica, I've strategically kind of placed you as the third answerer to that question because there's a follow-up that I want to kind of push on a little bit. I remember when I became associate dean of grad programs at ASU, I wanted that job so bad for so long, and it might have been 2 months after I got the job that I remember going into my office and putting my head down on my desk and just sobbing. It was like, why did I want this job? The faculty are so mean; they won't listen. Like my expectations were so different for what that job was going to be. So, can you help us start the kind of the secondary conversation here about challenges and expectations, right? Like, what are the big challenges you face in the role? Or do they meet with your expectations? Like, help us frame up that challenges and expectations piece.
Sure. Well, yeah, the challenges I think are numerous. You get in with all these grandiose ideas of how you're going to change things and everything's going to work so great, but then you have to understand that, you're not going to have the funding to implement, new software. Or, you're going to bring in all this enrollment growth, but there's not enough faculty to teach the sections. Um, you know, in terms of your applications, your application pool is huge, but you got two people working in your office that have to manage a database of 500 plus applications to screen. So, there's the flip side to all of that, and trying to work your way through, each area to try to stress the importance of why we need your buy-in and, why we're having a challenge. And it's not just about those final numbers. It's how do we come together to get to those numbers? Whose job is it to help with recruitment? They assume because, your job as the graduate enrollment and admissions is that you're going to get out there and bring in, all of these people and, increase enrollment overnight. And, like I said, with two people, that just isn't the case. It's kind of everybody's job to help when it comes to recruitment and helping faculty to see their value in that recruitment role because they're the experts and they really sell the program. Not to say that our office can't sell it as well, but it's selling that brand as well and, making, interested parties see, the value that your institution brings and that the faculty bring as well. There are always going to be obstacles, I guess, with any role. I think with graduate, it's a little different because the bread and butter is always undergrad. So, with the graduate side, we always feel like the stepchild or the afterthought because that's never the initial plan. It's like, oh, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Oh, and then there's grad studies. Let's give them something. It's always the afterthought. So I think that's where my expectations were different because, again, being in a faculty role and being on that side, I never had to really consider, what the graduate school and, the admissions side of the graduate school does. I only taught undergrad. I wasn't teaching graduate school as well. So I literally was not in any part of the graduate side. So it was opening my eyes to, one, what a graduate student looks like at Coppin State University. Who are we trying to recruit? What are the job trends and, the workforce demands? And, knowing that, where am I going to get these students to come here and get into our programs? And, even the programs that we offer, are they ready to meet workforce needs? Do we need to go back and, kind of rehash some things or, sunset some programs and refresh them later? It's just a whole host of things you have to consider, that at least coming into this, area, you don't assume will be like the major emphasis of what you're doing in your role. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's my take on it.
Yeah, no, interesting. Julie, I see a poem coming out of Erica's comments, and it's, leadership is an onion, right? There's like layers to the expectations here. You mentioned that you've been in this kind of role for a period of time here. How do you talk to people about the big challenges and how to set expectations? Because it's not just your expectations for the job, right? It's the external, or the internal perhaps expectations for what you'll do. How do you see this part of the conversation?
That's been at both some of the most challenging and frustrating, as well as some of the most rewarding aspects of my position. As a graduate dean, our whole effectiveness is really based on relationship building. And so the way that you interact with the dean of X college is going to be a little bit different from the way you interact with the dean of another college, and really finding that common ground and establishing a common purpose. Again, that's going to be different from one place to another. I think that's absolutely critical. And being patient that relationships aren't developed in the first 2 or 3 weeks that you are working together. It takes time. And sometimes, you have to be willing to adjust your expectations as well, knowing where people are and having to get there to be on the same playing field.
Interesting, interesting. All right, Kent, you've heard the two panelists before you go here. You've been through a complicated first year and now are in kind of a more stable spot from a structural perspective. Talk a little bit about the expectations and challenges conversation from your perspective, because you've got an interesting one given what you've been through.
Yeah, I think the challenge and the expectations are everyone, not everyone, but like the faculty, the fellow deans, many people are still viewing the Office of Graduate Studies as the College of Graduate and Professional Studies. And so even though we're 2 years out of the transition, the expectations are, well, is this your job or is this their job? Right. And so being able to really clearly articulate, here is our role in graduate education leadership and curricular innovation and market viability and graduate enrollment management. And here's where we can empower the academic colleges and empower the deans to really be in the driver's seat, where maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, it was the dean of the College of Graduate and Professional Studies that was in that driver's seat with graduate student success, and really empowering the associate deans and the graduate program directors to, to kind of give them the keys, if you will, to what they've been asking for quite some time. And I think one of the expectations that I think has never been explicitly stated in my experience was the leader of graduate education needs to be the activator across campus for graduate education. So it's more than the advocate. It's really taking that next step and not just talking about how great graduate education is and how we need more resources, but really reaching out to those individual units, those individual colleges, the different vice presidents, and really taking that next step to get the ball rolling and overcome that institutional inertia of this is the way it's always been in an environment that doesn't look anything like what I went through graduate school with, perhaps what Erica and Julie or many of our viewers on today went through, and really reframing that conversation that, yeah, we got a lot of institutional inertia, but if we're going to start building momentum, it's the first inch that's going to take the most work.
Sure, sure. Well, I'm going to keep you on the hot seat here as we talk about setting expectations and transition into the next question here. I want to talk about the way that you all see communicating about enrollment as core to your job here, right? So I want to talk a little bit about how you kind of communicate with the individual colleges about their enrollment goals and progress, as well as any kind of upward communication you have to kind of the university cabinet? Is there a standard cadence? Do you set goals together? How do you track progress to goals, if at all? Basically, I think what I'm asking here is something about how do we start the conversation about establishing best practices for how a central grad unit partners with the individual schools and colleges on their enrollment? And if you can share as part of your answer, how many people work in your office? We've got a good question in the chat here asking, please tell me how many FTEs you have. You can just hear it. So help us figure this out, communicating on enrollment.
Sure. I think early and often. I think that's my strategy, is early and often. So typically our annual graduate enrollment targets are set in collaboration with the provost, myself, and the senior vice president for finance, right? We do have to keep the lights on, right? And I think that's kind of where we often start. And then, you know, when we collaborate with the individual colleges, we look at where, you know, some of the challenges that Erica was talking about, where we may have demand, but we can't scale at the pace that to keep up with demand. So are we, you know, maybe do we need to take our foot off the gas and give the academic college a little bit more time to catch up, to make sure they have the infrastructure in place, and maybe turn on a faucet somewhere else and really focus our efforts elsewhere in that graduate recruitment and admissions you know, space. In terms of, you know, communicating what that looks like, you know, when the provost, the senior vice president, and myself have worked together to identify college level goals, we work with the deans and ask them for feedback. And if they see areas like they know that, you know, this program's accreditation is running out, or they're in an accreditation year, so maybe we're not going to have as many students coming in from this pot of students as we've had in the past. That's good to know from a holistic perspective and a university-wide perspective, that maybe we need to really pull some levers on in another college to make sure that we are hitting that target, even though it may not be what they were hitting the overall target, even if the colleges have some variability within them. In terms of how often we communicate with the deans and the graduate program directors on a weekly basis. So we have a dashboard that's real-time update of our enrollment data that any campus individual can access. And then on a weekly basis, we send out reports to each individual graduate program director on where students who have applied, what their status is. Are they incomplete? Have they been referred? Are they waiting for a decision? Where are they at in that process? And we've really pushed to empower the graduate program directors to make decisions in less than 7 days on their applications, because we've all heard speed to lead, and really making sure that we're turning those interested applicants into committed students as quickly as possible. And to just wrap this up, to answer the question about FTE, in my Director of Graduate Studies role, I am an office of one. So, and I also teach graduate classes, and then I'm also currently the interim Director of International and Graduate Admissions. So from that perspective, I have a staff of 4 individuals on the graduate admission side, but in graduate studies itself, it's an office of one.
All right, so we all need to, at the next chance we see you, take you out for a drink. Is kind of the bottom line on the FTE there. We'll go Julie and then Erica to help us wrap this up. Julie, Kent brings up some interesting material in here, right? There are real-time dashboards, plus there's kind of a standard cadence of communication. How's it set up at MSU on the regularly communicating about enrollment? Who's involved? What do you do?
So the software that we use for admissions allows us, the back end WebAdmit allows our Director of Admissions to track how much activity has happened on any submitted application. And so the term is local status. That means somebody's looked at it. And so if we don't see a change in local status after a week, interesting, Kent said the same thing, we start what I lovingly refer to as the nag emails, or they could be called the encouragers. And we're after the same thing, make a decision, let us know that you're on it. We copy their academic unit leaders and primarily their deans. And that's really effective because then the deans get a real sense of, the kind of work that our graduate program directors are doing, and they can support as well. So that's how we track what's going on with applications. For enrollment, I start tracking that 2 weeks after registration opens. And if I see anybody varying too much up or down, I'll send an email. If they're varying up, yay, what are you doing? Yay. If they're varying down, I'll say, is this real or is it a timing issue? How can we help?
Yeah. Okay, and how many folks work in your office?
So I'm trying to count on my fingers and toes. I think I have 10 full-time and 2 part-time and 3 graduate assistants. So do all the math. I don't know, what is that? 13.5, 14, something like that.
Okay, excellent. Kent, you need to reach out to Julie for help on justifying
But we
additional
do all
staff.
that stuff that Kent got,
Yes,
that
of
he
course.
dumped. I'm sorry, that he reallocated to another office. So we do all the admissions and kind of the registrar stuff. So we're still in that model where we do all that.
Perfect. All right, Erica, help us wrap this piece up. What's the kind of core here message around communicating up and down the hierarchy about enrollment?
Yeah, and I feel like we have a theme between Kenneth and Julie. It's pretty much the same here. We kind of weed through all of these applications. I think knowing what our goal is, and we usually get that kind of communicated down because, they just kind of make the guesstimate on what they need the numbers to be. And from there, we kind of look at our pool to see, which area we can kind of recruit more into and what we need to promote more. I think the challenge is getting the decisions back early. I think we, all struggle with that. We try to push within 3 to 5 days. The issue is always that it seems that we're making the decision when faculty breaks. So it's either during the Christmas break or it's during the summer break. And technically they're not here, but yet they're expected to still respond and, give decisions. At least the coordinators are. So that's a challenge. Some areas are better than others. We do send out the friendly nudges on a very frequent basis, but I think in terms of reporting and numbers, everybody has access to kind of see where we are. And I think that reporting is pretty steady, no matter what area you're in, so that you know how you're trending. It also kind of helps give that nudge that if your area is kind of low compared to, the previous semester or where you are, year over year, that, something needs to be done to get them moving and get some interest out in your area. So I think we're similar on different scales with that regard. And in terms of the manpower, myself, and I have 2 full-time employees.
Okay.
And I have a vacancy that I'm hoping to get somebody in as soon as possible. So we're wearing many hats over here.
All right, fingers crossed for a quick fill on that one. Just a quick note: we're getting some outstanding questions in the Q&A. I'm going to hold them for the end here. I think we've got time for another couple of questions before we get to that. Erica, I'll keep you on the hot seat. I want to talk a little bit about strategy. A lot of grad folks that we talk to have described a shift over the last kind of 3 or 4 years that has way more emphasis on grad enrollment than previously. There's lots of reasons for it, right? People talk about the demographic cliff, like, oh, undergrad's going to be pinched, so let's grow grad. But there's a lot of reasons there. What's your university's approach been to kind of grad enrollment growth? Is there a new emphasis there? Is there a strategy they talk about? How do they talk to you as kind of the fulcrum for where grad enrollment happens?
I think with us, there's definitely a shift to kind of increase our grad enrollment. Again, we're a small institution, but I think the value add is in graduate education. They can come right in. It's usually someone trying to improve their career path or get a certificate, so that they can earn some more money. We're also noticing a trend just within the community. Like there's a need for more mental health professionals out here. So we're seeing that area, grow significantly. In Maryland, we're also really known for the sciences and STEM. So, we're seeing growth in those areas. So knowing that where the trends are going and just within our localized community, we kind of try to develop more of a strategic marketing plan to appeal to those people to kind of drive the applications in and drive the interest. I know we've tried to invest more within our marketing as well. I know over the years there really was not much of a budget, if any budget, for graduate marketing. So that's been critical for us as well, to try to get more, information out about our graduate programs. Traditionally, we were known as an undergraduate institution. So there's still people who don't even know we have graduate programs.
Sure, sure.
So, any kind of growth from there is huge for us. But I think just investing in the marketing and looking at the workforce needs within our area, that's kind of where our strategy of growth comes from, just really taking an inventory of that.
Yeah, interesting. Julie, I'm lucky to know a little bit about the MSU kind of footprint of grad programs here. And I wonder, is there a similar conversation to what Erica's having in Maryland? Are you looking at like workforce demands? What's the strategy and the drivers there for when you talk about enrollment growth at grad?
I think it's interesting because there is an increased awareness of graduate enrollment, but we have made a very conscientious decision to be more strategic about it. For years, I was saying we need to get organized, we need to have strategies, and otherwise we're not going to get growth. And of course, then we'd set an enrollment record. So I was Chicken Little and no one would really listen to me. And then just this past year, it ticked down, which was traumatic for me, but on the other hand, good, because it really did emphasize the need to be strategic. So we did a survey of all graduate program directors. We looked at climate within the program. What are the competing demands for resources? How supported do they feel, et cetera? Came up with some pretty strong profiles of each program, and then had our provost, I'm so grateful for this, allowed us very focused time, about an hour and a half, with deans of all the colleges, where we sat down, went program by program, and talked about what is the capacity, what's the goal, what do you need from us as from the graduate school? And in some cases, there were things that we could do. In some cases, there were things we couldn't do. They had to do them. But I feel really good about that because we had a very honest conversation about how can we and should we grow. And somebody was asking in the Q&A about, are you using data regarding market need?
Yeah.
And we certainly are getting more about that for new programs. We've done that for doctoral programs forever, but we're getting to be more and more systematic about that. And now here's our next frontier. What are we doing about existing programs? Are we using data, external data about workforce needs, knowledge, skills, et cetera, to ensure that our current programs are maximally preparing our students for their next steps?
Oh, Julie, you just built the ramp for our next webinar where we talk about how to evaluate the portfolio of offerings. But Kent, what do you have to add here? I mean, it's interesting to hear that there really is kind of, if not a developed kind of strategic plan for how to grow grad at these other schools. What's the situation at Indiana State?
Absolutely. As you mentioned, graduate education is in the spotlight at Indiana State right now. Indiana's college going rate is hovering just above 50% right now for first-time full-time freshmen. And I would say back in 2021 is when we really started that shift of we're going to lean heavily on graduate enrollment to help sustain our overall university enrollment goals. And I think with that has come tremendous opportunities, but when you have the light shine on you, you can see all of your flaws and all of the challenges and things that maybe people were willing to overlook because the emphasis was on first-time full-time freshmen. And so when we look at our strategy, similar to what Julie and Erica were talking about, in terms of having individual one-on-one time with deans and graduate program directors, program coordinators, looking at external data with workforce demand, workforce needs, and also looking at skills for the 21st century workforce, and really using a lot of that outside data. Our strategy is kind of split into 3 different areas. So we're calling them build, advance, enhance. And so the build category are for those traditional 22-year-old students who are coming directly from undergraduate, perhaps going into a professional master's program, or they're really on the early stages of their career. The advanced kind of bucket is building and adapting programs for those career advancers who may want to stay in their same field of study, but are looking for complementary skills, or they're looking for more in-depth knowledge, or they simply need a graduate degree, particularly a master's degree, to advance for career promotion, quality of life issues, et cetera. And our enhance kind of bucket in the strategy is focused on micro-credentials, so certificate and licensure programs that are less than a degree. And so when we look at all three of these kind of buckets together, that makes up our overall strategy for the graduate enrollment space. And so when you look at how this plays out, on the build side, we're doing more on-campus programs, right? That also could cater to international students who are looking for master's degree programs. On the advanced side, we're looking at more asynchronous, online, flexible enrollment, 8-week terms. We're looking and building those programs. And on the enhanced side, we're looking at how we can work with external vendors, and I'm not external vendors, external partners, to not only incorporate our course content, but enhance that with some ready to use, badges or embedded certificates that have market meaning, perhaps more than a graduate certificate alone from Indiana State. So that's kind of how we're working our strategy, and we'll see how it goes. I think it's been working well overall. I think the biggest challenge has been trying to have behavior change through culture shift within the graduate faculty, because everyone is used to, this is how I've always done it, this is what my expectations are. But trying to shift everyone's expectations, that it's not your expectations that we're working towards. We need to shift ourselves to the students' expectations and the market's expectations of what higher education and graduate education is able to deliver in the current environment. And I think that's been the most difficult part of the build, advance, enhance strategy, is shifting that cultural mindset and trying to spark action through behavior change.
Oh, I love it. There's that old Peter Drucker line about culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So that is often the hardest part. I cannot even believe how we're running out of time so fast. So I'm going to pitch a final question from me before I get to our attendee questions, and just ask you to give me your 60-second kind of rapid fire response. So Julie, I want to ask about tech. How big of a role does technology play in your success, and how do you stay up to date on developments in technology in your space?
We were all scientists, we were all academics before we became deans. And so I think that same perspective permeates our position now. So in order to know your data, you have to have advanced technology. So I talked about the systems where we can monitor what's going on with applications, systems where we can monitor enrollment. And now we're learning new things. Every time my director of admission goes to some sort of summit that Liaison puts on, she learns new ways to configure an application, to tailor it, or something on the back end to do. This is the joy of my life. We are constantly trying to figure out new ways to use AI and learning how to do it. I think I'm about this close of getting ChatGPT to calculate the last 60 hours in at least MSU transcripts of GPA. So all of those things are really, really important. And just knowing that we are facing a moving target, but it's an exciting moving target, because many of the things that have taken so much of our time will take less of our time, so that we can do other things to support folks in ways that may not have been feasible before.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you. All right, Erica, how big of a role does it play? How do you stay up to date?
Wow. I think it plays a huge role, even down to admissions. I mean, we're struggling right now because we had a transition in our application system. The one that we had before wasn't really set up for grad school. So when I came into this role, that was my challenge, of just being able to get applications. And so we got out of that and, I guess we had the workaround and now we have a whole new system. So it's training, my staff to learn the system, but yet still be able to take applications and process them effectively and still be able to train our program coordinators while we're learning the system.
Yeah.
And you're also faced with those people who aren't tech savvy. I mean, shockingly, there's some brilliant doctors out here who are not good with technology and refuse to use it. So, that's a challenge as well. But, we really have to make use of the resources available, and data is huge. And, you get that through these new resources and ways to process the information so that we're more effective in our roles and we're not having to, push paper all the time and rely on, other people to get responses and answers. We need a workflow so that we can see where things are and where decisions are made, and, also be able to assess things from a operational level. How effective are they? All that reporting plays a role, and all that is through the technology. So I would say it's a huge factor that I consider in my role.
Okay, awesome. Kent, you've got the broad brush of effectiveness as well as the notion that data is the language of decision makers. What's the punctuation mark you put at the end of the tech sentence for the leadership in grad college, grad
I would say have a bias towards action, right? Like, because I think in higher education, when we introduce new technologies, we're like, oh, let's make sure everyone's on board and let's go through 6 months or 8 months or 18 months of decision making before we even start to implement something. And I think in the environment that we are in now, graduate education leaders have to have a bias towards action. That doesn't mean, disregard shared governments, but really adapt and almost an entrepreneur's mindset where it's like, we're going to do this the first time and it's not going to work great. And there's going to be people who tell us that we made the wrong decision. And just because there are bumps and there are hiccups along the way doesn't mean it wasn't the best decision. And so I think embracing that mindset of quality improvement, right? Like getting into plan, do, study, act, or PDSA cycles over and over and over again and failing early and saying, well, that didn't work, that didn't work, that didn't work, that didn't work, but not, but as an individual, and then empowering those people who are who you are influencing, right? Helping them believe that failing early and failing fast is not failure, but it's just how we have to rapidly adapt and how we have to be behaving in this marketplace.
Oh, I love it. Okay, I made a promise. I have to stick to it. We've got some great questions from the audience here. The first one I think is deceptively a short question. It's about enrollment deposits. I've had so many bigger conversations than I expected to this year about whether or not the enrollment deposit does what we think it does, how much the deposit should be, how many of them should be included. Julie, does Missouri State require an enrollment deposit of its admits? Does it vary? What's the story?
It depends on the program. So
Okay.
in clinical programs, that's part of the culture, that's part of the expectation. And so, yes, they require it. And of course, it varies on size from program to program, but all programs, of course, supply the deposit toward tuition once the student matriculates. But then I have a lot of my programs, like my MA in history, that would never fly in that. So it depends on the culture of the program. The graduate college does not require anything like that. It's up to the individual degree program.
Okay. Erica, enrollment deposit at Coppin?
No, we do not take one. Honestly, with the process that we go through to be able to get them enrolled by the start date is the goal. So by that time, they usually get a bill anyway. So
Okay. Perfect. Kent, Indiana State, where are you on the spectrum there?
No enrollment deposits, with the exception of highly specialized clinical programs, which have seat limitations within their program.
Oh my God, we could write a whole paper just on that. Okay, another question that seems like a quick one, but could actually be an in-depth question. And Kent, I'll kick it to you first. Does your unit handle all admissions and award degrees, or are there other offices on campus that do kind of the admissions execution at the front end and then the awarding on the back end?
So at Indiana State, in the past, the College of Graduate and Professional Studies did that in collaboration with the Office of Admissions and the Office of the Registrar. Currently, the Office of Admissions handles the admissions, where there is a Director of International and Graduate Admissions who oversees that, and then the Office of the Registrar awards degrees. We're going through a transition because admissions will be in a different division than the registrar in the near future. So we're anticipating some new challenges arising from that. But I think as long as we keep the student in the center, hopefully will work out well.
Okay, awesome. Erica, who makes the admissions decisions at Coppin and who does the awarding at the end of the program?
Well, our office does both. The admissions, I think, in conjunction with the program coordinators, of course,
Gotcha.
once they weigh in, but we do issue the decisions. And then in terms with graduation, again, once we get everything from the coordinators, we process and then send it to records who will mail out the degree, but we do all the processing in our office.
Okay. Julie, Missouri State, where are you on the spectrum here?
We do it all. Individual programs recommend admission to us. We validate that they verify that they've met our standards. So we offer admission out of the graduate college. And I have someone in my office clears. Of course, we have degree works. A lot of this is automatized, but yet my office is responsible for clearing everybody, not just for degrees, but also micro-credential certificates. So we have thousands and thousands of awards that are cleared by my office each semester.
That feels like it deserves a big deep breath. Thousands and thousands is the qualifier there. We have 100 fantastic questions, but I'm going to try to summarize a few of them into our final question here, which is this notion that enrollment isn't just getting a student to say yes and show up on campus. It's about getting them through the degree and getting them a successful outcome. So the question I think I'll try to synthesize here is, and Julie, I'll start with you. How involved is your office in the efforts to create an experience and help retain students throughout a graduate program?
I sound like a broken record, but I keep saying know your data. So our data at Missouri State regarding persistence completion are quite high. And so my office hasn't really gotten involved that much. Now, it wasn't always that way. I had about two or three programs when I first became dean that they had like a 50%, 40% persistence rate. And you could trace it back to one issue. And so that issue needed to be addressed directly with the program, point it out, show the data. And, at first they were like, well, it's not really that way, but the data did say it was that way. And then they took steps to manage that. And now they're one of my most successful programs in terms of ensuring student success. So my office really isn't that involved because the data tell me we don't have to be at this point.
Okay, excellent. Erica, do you have a big footprint here administratively about trying to keep folks retained and manage the experience at grad?
So we haven't traditionally, but I think we're trying to take a more proactive role now. Now that I have someone in that seat who serves as our director of policies and standards, what we're trying to do is manage it from a cohort level so that things like having their application to apply for candidacy, we're starting to send out those lists early on, to get them in the mindset, you're getting closer,
Sure.
to kind of edge them along the way, because we tend to have a lot of students stop out, again, they're in mid-career, they might have to, break for a semester or two. So, keeping them, abreast of where they are and, kind of gently nudging, in addition to the program coordinators who are much more, in touch with the students and, kind of encourage them along. But we are trying to take more of a proactive approach to stay on top of, the progression and keeping them on track.
Okay, excellent. Kent, you get the final word, and this is the final word from the panelists on the whole webinar, so no pressure. You're in an interesting matrixed position. How much influence or interaction do you have over the kind of enrollment persistence and outcomes there?
Yeah, so our work primarily has been working collaboratively with our graduate council and our faculty senate in re-envisioning our graduate catalog. So we've had policies in the graduate catalog for decades, and you can trace back and no one can understand why we did it initially, except for someone did it. And so it's really about, and some of the responses is rigor for rigor's sake. And so in the student success piece, we've really taken an intentional approach to closely examine every single one of our graduate policies and opening it up and trying to do the most generous interpretation of where our students could be today. That may not have been the case 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago when some of these policies were initially developed.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, Sarah, could you bring my slides up real quick here? There are so many other things that we could have talked about here. If you want to continue the conversation, you can see us at some upcoming presentations. We are going to be, oh, well, this is what we talked about, right? Set expectations, communications, et cetera. I think you guys get it. We're going to be presenting at the upcoming CGS annual. The kind of the student perspective, right? We had the administrator perspective. We'll talk about what it's like to be an applicant to these programs. And on the next slide, you'll see that we'll be at one of the regional meetings with a couple of conversations. For those of you who want to get up very early on Friday, November 15th, you'll see that we've got an early session there as well as one in the afternoon. To our panelists, thank you. To everybody who joined us on the webinar today, thank you. Adrian, I could do this for another hour, my friend, but I'll pass it back to you.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you, Kenneth, Erica, and Julie for a really fantastic conversation. And again, once again, thanks to Liaison for supporting the webinar. This was a great conversation. As Steve mentioned, the CGS annual meeting is coming up December 4th through 7th in St. Louis, and we hope to see you there. The program will further address today's topic, graduate enrollment management, along with other pressing issues in graduate education like systemic change, diversity, equity, and inclusion in a post-affirmative action environment, and AI, among other timely topics. So we really do hope to see you there. And one last note on the annual meeting, the hotel reservation deadline is coming up on November 8th. So if you're planning to join us, please take note of that deadline. Additional information about the program, registration and hotel details is on the CGS website. So thanks again, everyone. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Take care, everyone.